All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Monday, the third day of March. Wow, already into March. It is amazing how time flies. Hope you'll subscribe if you haven't yet done so. 240-242-5646 is how you can call me. And of course, we ask you to like as well. So lots of little homework for you. If you can do it, we'd really, really, really appreciate it. Let's see if we can get that subscribe now button. Why isn't it? There we go. Let's play that subscribe now. So bottom right to subscribe. And this is a live program if you're watching Monday just at noon East Coast. So you definitely have an opportunity to talk to me. You can also join us on Facebook at any time and Halitics. And that is a really nice resource, I believe, because some people don't really want to call in, and the dialogue really doesn't end. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and I welcome that. I welcome the vigorousness. What I don't like, personalities, insults, partisanship is fine if you're partisan based on policy, if you're based on programs, even if you're based on character. But if the partisanship is just simply me good, them bad, my guy good, their guy bad, I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that helps us move forward. So politics really is about trying to solve our problems, not about owning the other side. That's really why I do this. That's the only reason why I do it. And sometimes it gets kind of depressing, I have to admit, because I feel it's a losing battle. People that I've generally agreed with, right? Liberals. I always called myself a liberal. I've kind of moved to being a progressive. I still like the word liberal in a lot of ways. I think, the old FDR, LBJ, where government can solve problems, where when we work together, when we have a representative government, that it is essential. I truly believe that, and that's how I define liberal. But the term has really become corrupted, I believe, by Democrats who claim to be liberal, who claim to be the heirs to LBJ, to FDR, but really aren't fighting for poor, struggling, and working people, aren't fighting for civil rights, aren't fighting for marginalized people. And that's, to me, what a liberal stands for. So I called today's program Why Harris Lost and Dems Are Losing. And I put that little, it's over an image of Gaza and just how utterly destroyed Gaza is. And as a direct result of the policies pursued by Democrats, right, by Harris Biden. This didn't happen under Trump. Since Trump's been president, there has been a ceasefire. It's not a great ceasefire. I don't love by any means the way Trump is handling this, but it's better than what we had before. There isn't daily barrages of bombs on Gaza. And the headline, this is from Haaretz, so it's an Israeli newspaper. This is all from the images from Haaretz, and the headline in there, under pressure from Trump, Israel won't resume Gaza fighting in coming days. So again, the point is not Trump is good, not by any means. The point is that under Democrats, Gaza was destroyed. And Trump, whatever he's doing, at least is keeping the killing, the genocide from ramping back up, at least for now. Now, that could change. And Israel is doing a terrible, terrible thing. It is keeping humanitarian aid now. It has actually stopped the humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. But what they have not done is dropped more bombs yet, and hopefully that will not happen. So we're very, very critical here. We view Israel as a genocidal state. We view the Palestinians as victims, not as victimizers in any way. Yes, a crime was committed, a really bad crime, a terrible crime was committed against Israelis and others on October 7, 2023, but it was an understandable crime. It was a reaction to oppression, persecution, 75 years of persecution by Israel. And it's what you expect if you mistreat people. And the response by Biden and Harris was simply go ahead. Kill, kill, kill. We're not going to stop you. We're not going to tell you you have to stop. Trump to date has managed to stop that horrible dynamic. And that's why Democrats lose. Because Democrats don't stand for anything. At least not as a national party. At least not by candidate. And until that changes, they will lose. Now, I've gotten into it with a lot of people on this issue, and that's the focus. What do they stand for? Nothing. That's why they're losing. What are their policies? Nobody knows. That's why they're losing. People don't particularly like Donald Trump. They don't trust Donald Trump. They view Donald Trump as somebody who doesn't share their values, whose interests aren't the same as theirs. But Trump is doing things that some Americans, many Americans like, and he is standing up. It certainly appears for certain values. Now, we did see people standing up today. We saw a Democrat. Here is NOAA. This is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I always have so much trouble with that, NOAA. Now, this is a government agency that I have great respect for. I think what they're doing is incredibly important. A friend of mine from grade school married his wife, worked for NOAA for a while, and she is a great environmentalist. And I love what NOAA does. And we see quite a good-sized crowd here on East-West Highway in Silver Spring. I was there. I took this picture to hear a defense of what NOAA is doing. So this does seem to be, right, Democrats standing up. Here is Chris Van Hollen. So, I say they don't. I mean, obviously, nothing's totally etched in stone. There are exceptions. And I have spoken relatively positively about Chris Van Hollen. I think he is one of the better Democrats. I do think, and I've said this, he would have probably beaten Trump. We'll hear from him in just a moment. There's a picture I took of him. Here is the Fox video. They don't get all of it in there, but they get a lot of it. Rally against termination of NOAA employees. So let's start. This is going to be right when Van Hollen is talking, and I was very fortunate because I didn't record this, but they got exactly the part that I thought was valuable and valid when it comes to actually Democrats standing and fighting for something.
The big oil companies. You remember that other corrupt bargain. He said he would let them have their way if they gave him $1 billion, and they spent a lot of money to elect Donald Trump. And you know what they don't want people to know?
Right, so I like this part where Van Hollen was talking about oil, big oil, how they are behind the Trump administration. Now, of course, he doesn't tell you the whole story about how the oil companies supported Biden, I believe, in 2020. And I know far more extraction money went to Hillary Clinton, at least in terms of oil money, went to Hillary Clinton than it did to Trump. But yes, the oil companies, as I understand it, prefer Trump, not clear why, to Harris. But Van Hollen is explaining what's going on here. And he kind of does tell you a little bit of what he seems to think Democrats stand for.
They don't want people to know about climate change. Right. Because the oil companies don't want people to hold them accountable in any way for climate change. But as Dr. Cooley said, and others have said, not doing the science doesn't stop climate change. Yeah. What it does is hurt the American people. And
so I thought this was useful. I don't think this is great rhetoric by Van Hollen. It is definitely pointing the fingers. It's telling us how bad the other guy is. This is just being done in service of big oil. That is the cuts to NOAA. The cuts to government is being done in service of big corporations that don't like regulations. I think a more powerful speech for Democrats and for Democrats to win would be, hey, we're the party that's fighting for the environment. We support NOAA because they're doing crucial research to explain exactly how harmful fossil fuel emissions are to our planet, how they are stealing our children's future. How we must do everything in our power. And as Democrats, we're going to fight tooth and nail. If you decide we deserve re-election, we're going to fight tooth and nail to rein in fossil fuel emissions and also to make sure that the cost, because there will be a cost, right? We can only stop burning coal and oil and natural gas. We can only stop doing that if we're prepared to tighten our belts. But we're going to make sure as Democrats that the belt tightening is done by the fat cats, by the exploiters. That's what we're going to do as Democrats. And we are sorry because we haven't done that enough of that. We haven't fought enough for that. That's the kind of speech that would really move the American public. That's where you would be standing for something. You'd be standing for a clean, green environment for all of us, for the future. And you would be standing four square against in opposition to the corporate elites. That's how you win. But all that said, I give Van Hollen some credit. He is taking the right stance here, and he is calling out villains, which Democrats so often don't do. He is calling out the oil companies as the villains of this piece and Musk as a villain, which is good, but it's not enough. He doesn't explain sufficiently the cost to the American public of what Trump is doing here.
We need to shut down this operation. I want to make one final point because we have another big lie going on, which is this claim that this is all about making the federal government more efficient. This is a lie, and we have to shut down this lie. If you want to make the federal government more efficient, you don't start by firing the independent inspector generals, whose job it is to look out for waste, fraud, and abuse. You fire the inspector generals when you want to open the door to more waste, fraud, and abuse and corruption.
All right, so again, he's right on. There's no question. He is calling out the underpinnings of the DOGE movement, right? The Department of Government Efficiency movement to cut, to slash, and burn government programs. But again, it's not good enough. Fine, point fingers, point out how really this is a cover, right? The cuts, the slashing of government agencies that regulate and oversee corporations, malefactors, bad actors. Point out how this is really being done to protect those self-same malefactors, those corporate polluters. That's good, Chris. I agree with you. But you still need to take ownership of your own party's failures. And they don't do it. And you need to put all of that in context of a vision for the future. Our America includes the public overseeing companies to make sure that they act in ways that are best for all of us so that we can all prosper, not just a few at the top. That's the message you need to provide. And why doesn't he? Why can't Democrats provide that? Because they don't, in toto, believe that. That's not what they're about. And it would seem, it would be transparently false to a very significant degree. And that's, the bottom line is they aren't for you. They're not always against you to the degree sometimes Republicans are, but they're not for you either. It's slice and diced politics. They're not, right? What was the Trump comment? What was the Trump commercial? She's for that, Kamala's or Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. Democrats look at the electorate as different, discrete groups, and they try to appeal to those discrete groups rather than providing a vision for a better America for all of us. And rather than simply standing, if you're going to stand for discrete groups, stand for groups that are large, broad-based, share a lot in common, and that we're all going to agree are victims. So frontline communities where you can actually see the effluent waste from refineries that floats into their rivers. Impoverished people, homeless camps, not sort of co-ed groups where there's some victims, but there's also some victimizers. But Democrats can't do that. They will not stand for the poor, the struggling, and the working class generally. This was an image I took. This was one of the signs that was being held. And unfortunately, I didn't take a very good picture of it. But what the sign actually says is, first they came for the federal workers. And you can't really see that. First they came for the federal workers. But it's not really true. It's not really true. It wasn't. The federal workers are kind of the last that they've come for. What we've seen are manufacturing workers whose jobs have been offshored and outsourced, who have had to take ever smaller slices of the salary pie, right? The assembly workers, the assembly line workers, the manufacturing, blue collar folks. They're getting a smaller and smaller piece of the pie, if they even can get any piece of the pie at all. It isn't the federal workers who were the first victims. They're kind of the last victims. And it's because they, the federal workers, and I don't want to point out any in particular, but I'm just saying in general, there wasn't a sense among, as I saw it, and I do know because I know many federal workers, that they should have, would have, could have needed to stand in solidarity with all those folks whose jobs were lost under NAFTA, under Bill Clinton's NAFTA, under CAFTA. And what were some of the others? Under the free trade deals that W pushed through and that Obama pushed through. You didn't hear from work. I heard federal workers tell me, oh yeah, I can't support Medicare for all because we can't all afford good health care, and at least I get it through my federal job. Well, that's false. It's false. It isn't true that we can't all afford Medicare for all. In fact, it's the opposite. We can't afford not to have Medicare for all. But the attitude that I heard is incredibly problematic. It's setting yourself as a different kind of worker, as someone say different from a gig economy worker who doesn't have health care. So if you don't want to suffer through Trump, if you don't want to live in a dog-eat-dog economy where you're on your own, as now federal workers are, right? A lot of them are just on their own. They're getting, their jobs are gone. If you don't like that, then you've got to stand in solidarity with all workers and demand better. And that doesn't mean Democrats. It sure doesn't mean it right now. So you see over and over this failure to have a vision to say, this is what we as Democrats stand for. We're going to fight for a better world, a better society, better for workers, better for victims of empire, better for victims of genocide, an end to that, an end to endless war. Democrats don't stand for that, and that's why they lose. That's why they lose. One of my favorite Democrats is Mark Elrich, who is the county executive in my county, which is Montgomery County. And he's pretty close to a Democratic socialist. He's about as close as you can come without being Bernie Sanders. And Bernie isn't even as close as you can come as without being, he's about as close as you can come without being Bernie Sanders of 2016, was a lot more of a Democratic socialist than today's iteration. But Mark, for whatever reason, has a major, enormous blind spot when it comes to Israel. And I'm not sure whether it's, he really has that blind spot or if it's just politics as usual. He's not term limited out. He can run for county executive one more time. Maybe he's thinking, I want to be county executive in 2 more years. I want to get reelected in 2 more years. That may be his attitude. I'm not going to buck the Zionist lobby. I really don't know. But he has been an enormous disappointment when it comes to standing up for Palestinians, standing up for victims of American empire in Israel. He has been an enormous disappointment. So again, we're not seeing Democrats stand for something that we can all look at and say, this is a good. Now, I get it. A lot of you don't agree with me on this. You don't think we should stand with Palestine. Okay, you don't have to agree with that, but stand for something. Don't just stand for naked dollars and cents. Now, I think you should stand for Palestine. I think this is a moral crisis. The fact that we have allowed that the Democratic president and vice president not only allowed, enabled, facilitated, permitted genocide to occur. I think that's an absolute crime of extraordinary proportions. It's just pure evil. So I would never say, okay, well, it's okay because you stand for universal single-payer health coverage. It's okay that you let Palestine be destroyed. You let Gaza be razed. I would never say that's okay. But at least you could make the case, hey, we're fighting for working people. We're fighting for more people. We're fighting for Medicare for all. But they're not even doing that. So you can see this meeting. We were there, and we have blocked the MIDC, blocked the Maryland Israeli Development Center. I'm the Free Palestine flag right there, and it also has blocked the MIDC. And Mark's like, no, I'm for it. No, I'm not going to block it. It's so disappointing. This is what, because they give us nothing. They just don't. They just don't have convictions. They don't fight the good fight. They're not ultimately standing for anything. It's just about, I guess, I don't know what, corporate contributions. Breakfast meeting, Mark Elrich will not cut the grant. Brought up the slippery slope and not doing a purity test on companies they give grants to. Well, that is not going to feed the bulldog. You take that position, you don't stand for humanity, you're not going to be able to win elections. Yeah, you'll win here and there, but you aren't going to get any kind of real mandate. You're not going to have the kind of loyalty built in that will allow you to win election after election after election, the way the Dems of FDR did. And he did win election after election after election, right? He won after election 4 straight. And Dems kept the Congress for 40, 50 years. Because they stood for it. It was understood. If you're a Democrat, you are going to be fighting for working people. You are going to be fighting for unions. That was understood. And that vibe, that feeling was lost. It's lost. Could it come back? I suppose, but not for a long, long, long time. Here is now, I get it. I care more about Palestine. I care more about Gaza than maybe many others do. On the other hand, a really interesting poll suggests that the specific reason, more than any other, that Harris lost is because she refused to stand against genocide. That Biden voters sat out the election in enormous numbers, 20 million, 18 million, 20 million. It's far more than enough to swing that election nationally. Well, Trump actually got the plurality of votes, but that far more than the difference nationally in terms of the vote total sat home. because they were so disgusted, so heartsick, so angry at the Harris-Biden administration's support for genocide, and specifically Kamala Harris's refusal to say she would do something differently, and far more than enough in the Great Lakes states that determined that election. So if you want to point to one issue, even if you don't think you don't feel the same way I do about Gaza, enough voters did. Was it worth it? Was it worth it not to stand for Gaza? You lost the election. So this is my delegate. He's my delegate, Aaron Kaufman. I wrote to him. I said, hey, we shouldn't be funding this Maryland Israel Development Center. This is money. This is grant money that goes to Israeli companies that are doing business in Montgomery County to set up operations here, to put an office in Montgomery County, or to put it in Maryland more generally. And I think it's a few $100 million, or maybe, no. That's how much they claim is coming in, millions of dollars. It's a small grant as these go, a few $100,000. But the response is, thank you for reaching out. I believe the MIDC, Maryland Israeli Development Center, is vital for international investment in Maryland. There are 34 Israeli companies in Maryland that generate hundreds of jobs and millions in revenue. So that's the justification. It's just pure dollars and cents. Now, I reject the argument that we couldn't have a vibrant economy that works for all Marylanders without those companies. And I would also argue that, in fact, the economy in Maryland hasn't worked particularly well for most Marylanders. There are very high levels of poverty. There are very high crime rates in certain communities. Western Maryland is impoverished in many communities. So I don't think this sort of targeting of white-collar, high-tech Israeli companies, biotech, and by the way, military software, I don't think that's served our state particularly well. But whether it has or hasn't, what you're doing is elevating purely money, soulless dollars and cents. You're weighing against human life. And you know what? That doesn't really work. That doesn't excite people. That doesn't motivate people. That doesn't tell people this is somebody I care about, I respect, I trust to do the right thing. And this is why Democrats lose. Now, some of you may say, well, but Trump is just as bad. Trump is even worse. We'll get into that in a little bit. Why I think Trump has a response to that many find persuasive. By the way, 240-242-5646 would love to talk to you. Let me see if there's any comments in the chat. I don't see any at this point, which is fine. 240-242-5646. If you're wondering about the confrontation between Trump and Zelensky, which I think has been pretty unfairly covered in the media, I'll focus much more on that tomorrow with Arlen, because it's going to be a Tuesday with Arlen going forward, and tomorrow is Tuesday, so we'll have Arlen. Here's what I wrote back to Aaron Kaufman. Thanks for this response. In other words, it's all about the Benjamins, how we're going to take the money. But I ask you, would you have supported investments from Nazi Germany to Maryland and vice versa? Fundamentally, there is no difference. And then I go on to, say, hey, you're Jewish, so maybe that's part of the issue. I don't really know. I'm Jewish, but we have a duty. And as an elected official, I wrote this, why go into politics at all if you're not prepared to stand up and fight for what is right? That's what people want. That's what we want from our politicians, is that you're going to fight for what is right. You're going to stand for something. That's how you win, is you stand for something. Seems like Democrats just don't. In fact, they don't. It's not that it seems, they just don't. Now, I have to acknowledge, and much to my almost amazement, but nothing amazes me. There are a lot of pundits out there, people who I even have a grudging respect for or admiration, who don't see it this way, who they don't even think it matters whether you stand for something. That's not how you win elections. And I get it. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes, the person who wins is someone you want to have a beer with, or at least that's how it's portrayed in the media. You can't always win every election. Sometimes bad people win, even up against good people. Hillary Clinton beat Bernie. That was awful, right? I mean, that was a terrible, terrible decision by the electorate. So I agree. Standing for something doesn't always win. Being on the correct side of issues doesn't always win. But you might as well try. You might as well use that to your advantage and support people who are for the right thing. So this is a guy I've gotten into it with it before. He's in California. I don't mean to be hard on Spencer. I actually like Spencer in certain ways. I think his heart is in the right place. I think he does want the right outcomes for working people, but I also think he's in the belly of the beast. He's corrupted, not like, oh, I want more money, but he's just inside that echo chamber where Dems are good, Obama's good, and you just cannot hear the criticism, cannot understand it, cannot integrate it. I know that because when you're partisan to that degree, that you believe your side is right and the other side is wrong, you're not going to hear arguments that, well, wait a second, this is what they did wrong. They should have done this. They should have done that. They should stand for this. They should have pursued these policies, and they didn't. That's why they're losing. If you're so partisan, you can't accept that. You can't say, well, we're to blame, or we bear a significant amount of blame for it. Then you look for alternative explanations. You flail around. And one of those alternatives is policy doesn't matter. Even if we had done what you said, even if we had fought for Medicare for all, even if we had stood against the Israeli genocide, it wouldn't have mattered. We still would have lost. So here's just a little snippet from this back and forth, or it's really just the host introducing Spencer, and then I'll get into what he had to say on social media with me. So here we go.
Liberals need to get back in touch with the universe below their necks.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, the podcast that has no...
So let me stop it. So the issue that Spencer just in that introduction tells you is liberals need to get into touch with the world below their necks. So I don't disagree. Yes, there's a certain intellectualism that has crept in, a little flaccidity, right? It's just about arguing about how many angels are in the head of the pin that some liberals engage in, and that is a big problem. So continue.
They're standing quietly by while Donald Trump runs roughshod over our democracy. Today, the Democrats are doing a lot of hand-wringing about their election loss, but they're emerging from their shock and are taking to the streets to fight back. There have been many questions emerging since the election, including such basic ones as what do Democrats really stand for, and what's a liberal, and how to get working people back into the fold. So we have with us today Spencer Critchley, a writer, political analyst, the author of Patriots of Two Nations, Why Trump Was Inevitable and What Happens Next.
All right, I'm going to stop it there because I want to, we already heard from what Spencer said, which is that liberals are too intellectual, that they're not, they're too in tune with their minds and they're not focusing on the heart. I don't totally disagree with that. I don't think that they are reaching out emotionally to people, but we got into a huge disagreement about how to do that. What the host said is very clear. This interview is about what Democrats stand for. That was the first thing he said. What do Democrats stand for? And how can they win working people back? And I would argue You stand for working people. That's how you win them back. You say, we're going to fight to make sure you have health care. Every single American deserves it. You deserve it. You deserve a living wage, fair day's pay for fair day's work. You deserve a secure retirement. That's what we stand for. You deserve a clean environment. That's what we stand for as Democrats. That's how we win. Now, they don't stand for that. That's why I'm not a Democrat. But it seems so clear, doesn't it? If you want to win the working class back, then stand for the working class. And when Spencer posted this on his social media, I asked him that. I said, well, okay, what do you stand for? Which is what your host said you were going to talk about. The first thing he said, what do they stand for? And then I asked, single payer healthcare, peace, ecological. By the way, peace is a big thing for working people because a lot of them are fighting the wars, these imperial wars, which they know don't benefit them in any tangible way. What did Goering say? Of course, Farmer doesn't want war. The only thing he can get out of it is maybe coming home in one piece. So of course he's not going to want that war. So my question was, well, you want to appeal to these working people. What do you stand for? And I thought it would be a great, and if you, and then there's a lot of discussion. Well, they don't really care about policy. Voters don't care about policy, right? They don't. So if you say, well, I support Medicare for all, the response might be, well, that's a policy fight. The important thing is just to stand for health care for everybody, but whether it's Medicare for all or some other national health service, whatever it is, that's not as important as the actual issue, the broad base, writ large issue. Now, I don't think you can separate the two. Policy and beliefs go hand in hand. What you care, what you support, what your values are is only reflected in what your policies. But if you want to be real picky-uni about it, you could say, well, we stand for working people, but how we make life better for working people is a policy fight we don't have to get into. Okay, let's not get into it. What do you stand for? And the response, which was so strange, not the point of the interview, but the point of we heard it. What do Democrats stand for was the first question. And then that's not the point of the interview. But I don't think Dems will reconnect till they learn how to connect instead of thinking everything is policy first. Well, that's fine. Don't think it's policy first. But it's not policy to say what we stand for. We stand for peace. Does that mean we slashed the Pentagon budget? Does that mean we don't ship arms to Ukraine and Israel? That we can argue about that. But at least say this is what we stand for. But there's not even that. So again, this is somebody who worked with Democrats. This is a Democratic consultant. This is somebody who writes books targeted to the Democratic Party. How could anyone be surprised they can't win elections? How could anyone be surprised they don't win elections when their consultants tell them, you don't need to stand for anything. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of this. Policy doesn't matter. That's not how. Well, okay, even if it doesn't, what does? I agree with you. Policy doesn't always. Look, most Americans preferred Bernie's policies to Hillary's. And most Americans preferred what Bernie stood for to whatever Hillary stood for, which we don't really know because she never tells us. I get that. And yet Hillary still won. So you could say, well, see, hell, look, standing for something doesn't matter. Good policies don't matter. Okay, in one election, which was very close, much closer than anyone ever thought it would be, where Hillary was going to simply be coronated, in that one election, the candidate whose policies are closer to those of the voters, who stands for values, whose values are closer to those of the voters, that candidate, it's true, did not win. But guess what? The candidate who beat him couldn't even beat Donald Trump in the election because she didn't stand for anything, because she didn't have clearly formed, clearly articulated policies. Now, if you said, well, but what about Trump? What does he stand for? Trump doesn't have any values. He doesn't believe. He just wants to give government over to Elon Musk. You know, I think that's not really true. The problem with that argument is whatever you believe in Trump's motives are, is he just a pure con artist? Is he a sociopath who has no concern for anyone but himself? That may be true. I don't disagree with it. But Trump does articulate certain values, and he says he stands for them. And he even says it with some persuasiveness. For example, in the wake, and I told you we'll talk much more about his debate with Zelensky, his meeting with Zelensky, him and Vance and Zelensky. We'll talk much more about that tomorrow with Arlen. I'll have clips too. But Trump says, hey, he doesn't want peace. And then he says, I do want peace, right? Trump says, this is what I stand for. Now, you may say he's a liar. You may say he's full of crap. You may say he's not believable when he says that. Okay, but he says it. He says it, and he even highlights, well, I highlighted it, but he even capitalizes it. I want peace. So Trump is telling you right there, this is what I stand for. I heard Chris Van Hollen talking about how upset he is, and I think he's fair, and I like Van Hollen. He's better than most Democrats by far. How we have to protect federal workers. We have to protect NOAA. But did he say, I stand for the environment? I stand for clean air and water? Wouldn't that have been what you would? Do you understand? I want clean air and water. That's why we have NOAA. Is this that hard? Am I missing something? Tell me what I'm missing if you disagree. 240-242-5646. Put it in the chat if you disagree, if you think I'm missing something, or if you agree with me. But this is really a huge deal. And if you say, well, Trump, no one can believe what Trump's saying. First of all, people will believe you if you say something over and over, whether it's true or not. But in fact, Trump has kind of an argument that he believes in peace. He's been saying this for over and over. He did reach out to Putin and say, no more, let's stop it. Right? He did. However he did it, right now, the bombs aren't falling on Gaza. When he was president, he negotiated the end of the Afghan war. Now, Biden, to his credit, great credit, followed through on that. But when Trump says, I'm for peace, I want peace, it's not complete BS. I'm not saying Medea will tell you he's not a peace president. When I listened to the Gray Zone, Armade said, hey, I agree with a lot of Trump's take on Ukraine, but not all of it. He doesn't take ownership for the way he provoked Russia, the way he amped up tensions with Russia. So not like Trump has any kind of great takes. Even in the area where he's the least bad, which is clearly foreign policy. But that said, he does have a little bit of a point. And he is saying, I'm standing for something, which is peace. Democrats have to do that. They want to win. You got to stay. Because you know what? Nothing will never beat something. Well, every now and then, I hate to be, sometimes nothing will beat something. But lots of times nothing won't beat something. So if you want to beat Trump, you better stand for something and you better be persuasive about it. If you want to say, I stand for a clean environment, a clean green environment, great. Then stand for it and demonstrate it in your policies. more examples where I just think the Democrat Party doesn't stand for anything and doesn't fight for anything, and that's why it loses. So I posted this, you can see. So blame for the nominations of Hillary in 2016 and Biden in 2020 rather than Bernie falls on Dem primary voters, right? Because they're the ones who voted for Hillary and Biden. And that's why we got Trump. Well, Biden won in 2020, but in the end, Biden led to Trump. Because Biden wasn't a great president. Biden didn't pursue policies that made life better for poor, struggling, and working people. And Biden didn't pursue peace. He did Afghanistan, yes, the peace there, but not Russia, not Gaza. So that's why we have Trump. And Dem primary voters deserve an awful lot of the blame for it. Now, I was involved in progressive groups in 2020 especially, but maybe in 2016, I don't remember. And we backed Bernie to the hilt. We pushed like hell for Bernie. And so did PDA and some of those other groups there, or they weren't even in existence. I don't think Sunrise existed in 2020. Maybe I'm wrong. So, and I want to give our revolution a little bit of credit too, because I've been critical of our revolution. Now I am here. I talked about fighting for working people, right? And I said, hey, the government or the plutocrats, the oligarchs, they didn't first come for federal workers. Federal workers actually were among the last to be come for. It was the private sector workers who really got in the neck a lot earlier, and often under Democratic rule. But that said, I give our revolution credit. Our revolution did fight for working people. We had Mike Olis on this program, and he was out there in West Virginia trying to prevent a pharmaceutical factory that Joe Manchin's daughter had an interest in, trying to prevent that from being shuttered. And it was shuttered. She made a lot of money out of that, I believe. His family made a lot of money out of that, being the Manchin family. But our revolution fought against that. Our revolution was in, I believe it was in Indianapolis, shortly after, I think it was our revolution, shortly after Trump was elected, to try to keep a carrier plant in business, going, in operations, and it was somewhat successful. So I give our revolution credit. They really were fighting for working people in those moments, and they get a lot of credit for it. But here, they don't get credit because they fell in line for Kamala. They fundraise off of her. They campaigned for her. And given how Democrats under her administration, right, the Harris-Biden administration, is complicit in Gaza and Ukraine, ever greater inequality, the climate holocaust. Now you had an opportunity. There was a moment in 24 to rally the troops in support of the Green Party. And you didn't do it. You didn't do it. And instead you went after the Green Party. So I can't, I'm not supporting. Now I posted this in the Our Revolution in Montgomery County group chat, which was, I thought, the exact right place to post it. And you can see there was a lot of appreciation. There's a thumbs up, there's a heart, there's a care. A lot of people agreed with what I had to say. And no one posted, there was a few disagreements. That's not true. There's people said, hey, this isn't the, given what we're seeing right now, I think it was people were very upset about Trump supposedly disrespecting Zelensky. That, how dare you criticize the Democrats? How dare you criticize our revolution for supporting Harris when you look at just how bad Trump is? And that's fine. Let's have that debate. Let's have that discussion within the group. This group was not created to be sheepdog for the Democratic Party. This group was created, as I understood it from the beginning, was to build a progressive party, whether it's the Democrats or an alternative. Remember, Bernie was behind our revolution at the beginning. Bernie's not a Democrat. So it's not, at least I never imagined our revolution to be a Democratic mouth organ. But one of the moderators or the administrators of that page did not like what I had to say. But instead of saying, well, this is why I think you're wrong, I was told, just don't post that here. I might suggest this is really not the place to post these sentiments. One doesn't go into a neighbor's home and start criticizing their decor. You're welcome to your takes, but that's not appropriate here, and yet you're doing it repeatedly. Okay, so very strange. There was no repeat. This was the only, I went back and looked. This was the only criticism I saw on that page by me of the organization. Now, maybe I missed something. I don't remember. It's been years and years. There probably were some other things certainly things I thought, but I don't know why I'm being told I'm doing this repeatedly when this was the only example I could find. But even so, is this the same as going into a neighbor's home? This is an organization that together we are part of. If I was in my own home and I'm talking to my spouse, people I share the house with, yeah, I might say, hey, I think this couch looks tired. We need to get a new one. Now, that's my house. This is my group. I'm part of this group. I'm not allowed to go into the group and say, well, this is why I don't like the sofa that's in our group living room. And the response would be, I would think, hey, this isn't the place to talk about how you don't like the sofa. The response would be, hey, I really like that sofa. If you do, if you don't want to hear the criticism, wouldn't the response be, hey, that's a really nice sofa? Or, yeah, maybe we could use a better sofa, but I went over to the store yesterday and I didn't see anything better. Or have you seen the sofa in the living room down the street? It's even worse. So it's a very strange response, isn't it? You're not supposed to say, I'm not happy with this group's direction. Very strange. It seems to me the response should be either this is why it's a good direction and I disagree with your take, or yeah, maybe we should be moving in a different direction. Not, don't tell me you don't like my group. Very, very strange. So then there was, let's see if I can get this. So I was defended. Somebody wrote, hey, that's not fair. It's our group. We get, and somebody was brought up Zelensky and said Zelensky got criticized for supposedly coming to the White House and criticizing Trump. And it's not Zelensky's house, but the fact is we should be open to criticism. We should be willing to hear both sides of issues or all sides of issues, including whether our organization is doing a good job, whether our organization is pro-worker. Hal doesn't like the fact that our revolution supported Harris and doesn't like the fact that our revolution didn't talk to the members of the organization and didn't reach out to the members and didn't get anything out of its support for Harris. It seems to me that's something that's perfectly appropriate to discuss in our meeting, in our group. And so the follow-up to the defense of me, not by me, is Zelensky didn't criticize Trump, though I think he did, but regardless. Anyway, criticism is fine. Fair discussion is welcome. If I didn't think so, I could have hidden Hal's comment. Well, in fact, he didn't even have to post. That doesn't mean it's not an abuse of his former status with the group to level repeated ad hominem attacks born out of his personal animus to the national leadership. Okay, again, there's nothing repeated. This is the only time I've ever posted it. It's not an abuse of my status to post. I mean, it's not like I had the right to post. It had to be approved. I should have the right to post. I'm irritated I don't, but that's a different issue. This is something for discussion. This is something the group should discuss. And I just finished with this. This is, and it goes to the whole heart and soul of the problem with the Democrat Party. They don't stand for anything. So I said, hey, I have a problem with this group. This group supported Harris without getting anything for for it from her. This group didn't go to the membership and say, should we support Harris? What does the group stand for? Harris doesn't stand for anything. What does this group stand for? And what does it stand for? It stands for, we don't want to hear criticism. We don't want to discuss this. We don't want to hear from you if you don't support what we're doing. So my response is, hey, that's an unfair criticism. It's not fair for you to say, oh, Hal's abusing his privilege. It's not fair for you to say, I'm leveling repeated ad hominem attacks. And if you don't agree with what I'm saying about this group, why not? What is wrong with it? Which you didn't do. But instead you question my motives. You say, well, it's because you have a problem with the leaders. Well, I do. I do have a problem, but I have a problem with them because of what they're doing. I don't like what they're doing. I don't like what they're doing in this organization. It's not that I don't like what they're doing when they go out with friends. It's not that I'm mad that I didn't get invited to a party at their house. I don't like what this organization is doing under their leadership. Where am I supposed to post it? And nor is it repeated. You say I'm repeating it. I guess I've told this person that I have problems with it, and I guess that's why they view it as repetitive. But that's not relevant. What's relevant is what's in that group. And I haven't been repeating. But this goes to the problem the Democratic Party is having. Why they're losing. Because there's no self-examination. There's no self-awareness. There's no vision. And there's ultimately nothing they stand for. Except we don't want to hear criticism. So I thought this was a great meme. This got a lot of criticism from some Dems, I guess. But I just think this is exactly right. Because this is who the Democratic Party is. They don't stand for anything. Except they hate Trump. They're against Trump. They're against the Republicans. You can't win consistently by you can't beat something with nothing. So what did Trump say? I want peace. You can disagree with him. You can say that he doesn't want peace. You can fight that tooth and nail. But as you can see from this meme, I stand with Ukraine. Be honest. I'm being honest. I don't care about Ukraine. I just hate Trump. And, people might say that's not true. I really do care about Ukraine. You could say that. And I believe you if you say that. But our vital interests aren't implicated by Ukraine. And what Trump is proposing isn't giving up Ukraine's sovereignty. What Trump is proposing is, hey, there's been a long war. Let's end it. Russia won a lot of territory in that war. A lot of people were killed. We're going to have to figure that out. Not, it's going back to Ukraine. If you really cared about Ukraine, you would want peace. You would say, no more killing, no more death. No more meat grinder. And even if you care about Ukraine, if you feel that this is a horrible, horrible thing, that, part of Ukraine is now going to become Russian, or part of it already is Russian, right? It's Russian speaking, but now it'll be part of Russia. If you find that so awful, so horrific, you have to understand that lots and lots of Americans don't. That lots and lots of Americans don't feel that way. That lots and lots of Americans feel like our vital interests aren't at stake. And that we spend hundreds of millions, maybe $1 trillion, when much more important matters are not getting the shrift they need. So I would ask you to take a broader view. But regardless, the Democrats don't stand for anything. They don't present as standing for anything. Now, even if you said, well, I stand for Ukraine, you're American. You could say, I stand with Israel. Okay, but you're American. What is the vital American interest, or even the not so vital American interest in fighting to the last Ukrainian? You could say, well, we just can't give in to a dictator. We can't give in to Putin. But you're not giving in to Putin. That's a false framing of the issue. It's not Munich in 1938. Nobody's giving a dictator a country. Nobody's saying you can march in. What we're saying is you have power politics going on. You have an enormous hegemon, the United States, that in concert with its capitalist allies, Western Europe, has been dominating Europe and has been encroaching east. And you've got a autocrat, totalitarian, dictator, what have you, in Russia, who doesn't like that encroachment towards his country, where he's the leader, is afraid of it, and with some reason, and has responded with an invasion which was ill-advised, destructive, harmful. Nobody is innocent here. Nobody doesn't have some blood on their hands, including Zelensky, who gave in to the demands of Harris, Biden, Johnson, Blinken to stop negotiating with Putin when he could have possibly brokered peace. But nobody has clean hands, clearly. We are where we are. How do we escape with as little additional bloodshed as possible? And Trump is apparently trying to negotiate that. That's what we should be doing. But the Democratic Party doesn't stand for peace. Presumably it doesn't stand for endless war either. It may or may not stand with Ukraine. We don't know. And that's why they lose. Okay, before we go, I want to play one more clip, because when I got into it with a Democratic elected recently, their response was, hey, have you heard what Tim Walz has to say? The Democratic Party, they kind of get it. They're getting better. They're not the same party that you criticize. And, I went back over history, but this was what was presented. I could say, well, hey, they've been getting worse and worse. I'm not really, particularly, and yeah, Tim Walz wasn't a terrible choice for vice president at all. I actually thought he was a good choice. But the fact of the matter is, Harris didn't campaign with him. She campaigned with warmonger Liz, Torture Dick's daughter. That Harris's top advisor, Tony West, is a neo-lib and a tech bro. So I could have pointed all that out. But okay, I like Tim Walz. And this interview was pointed to as an example of the new, in quotes, Democrats who get it, who are going to be better going forward. So I'm just going to play a tiny little clip because this is what was brought to my attention. I don't want to waste too much time, but here, let's play this clip.
Like, one of the things that I always fault Democrats for is that, or at least I looked at Republicans, during Biden's administration, we saw Texas really, and Florida, really just be like, we're doing our own thing. Yes. Now, and Democrats can do that to a certain extent, right? I mean, they may be punished. Yeah. So talk us through that.
Yes. And look, I hear the thing out there is that when we get back, which we'll fight. I'll tell you what people are going to expect is they're not going to expect us to tinkle around the edge with the ACA. They're going to expect universal health care. And if they're...
All right. And that was as much as he said. They're going to expect universal health care. He doesn't say we're going to deliver. He doesn't say we're going to provide that. We're going to make sure everyone gets universal health care. We're going to fight tooth and nail for universal health care. He doesn't. And as soon as he said that he immediately moved on. Let me just stop it there because I really wanted just to show how there was a pivot. And I didn't do it very well, so I apologize for that. But we'll see if we can get to the point where Tim Walz says, this is what people are going to expect, and we're going to deliver. Because he doesn't. And that's the problem. That's the problem, is that, and the person who brought this to my attention, the Democratic elected who brought this to my attention said, hey, he said they're going to expect it and they're going to get it. But that's not what he says. So let me play this again, because Walz very, very quickly pivots He realizes he's kind of stepped in it when he says the voters are going to expect universal health care.
With the ACA, they're going to expect universal health care. And if there's a lesson here, I always said this, we had a 1-vote majority in
So he doesn't. See, he says they're going to expect it, but not we're going to deliver. So what do you stand for? You understand what voters want, but you're not going to deliver it. And then you go on to talk about a few things you did in Minnesota. So again, I don't see this as some kind of a powerful brief in support of Democrats or electing Democrats, or that now we've infiltrated the Democratic Party and they're going to be our party. They're going to be the party of working class voters. You're not hearing that. All you're hearing is a recognition from Tim Walz that this is what voters want, not this is what we're going to make sure they get. All right, don't forget, click subscribe. If you haven't yet done so, please do click subscribe. I am going to ask you to like. There's the little thumbs up button. I put together a little gift for you. And finally, and I am seeing growth. I had one of my most loyal listeners, viewers, somebody who's been with me forever since the old Monterey days and before. They're a little fed up. They feel like I'm not responsive to their preferences, I guess, on Halitics. And that's unfortunate. But the group itself is growing. We're seeing more comments. We're seeing more members. And I think it's a great resource for what I'd really like is us working together to solve problems. I'm not seeing that the way I would, but at least people are expressing their views. And we're going to get to the point where we're actually brainstorming solutions. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed today's Halitics. Don't forget, tomorrow will be a Tuesday, right? A brand new Tuesday with Arlen.